What's up everybody, Nate here, and I've been seeing some crazy headlines regarding the housing market so far in 2023, and it looks like banks, experts, and investors can't make up their mind on which direction the housing market is heading next. Prices will crash! No, they're going to soar! It's true that the housing market has experienced a bit of a slowdown compared to its peak in 2021 and 2022, but does that mean we are going to experience an outright crash sometime soon? Well, today I want to take a little bit of a more realistic approach to what is happening in the housing market right now, and I want to talk about the three major factors that are driving prices in the market right now and what we can expect to see in the future. Number one, sellers are quiet quitting the housing market right now, meaning they are getting out and they are not putting their house for sale. Now, the term quiet quitting has been used mostly to describe the workforce, how employees are basically only working the 9 to 5 right now and are no longer putting in any extra effort because it looks like their employers are also not putting in any extra effort. Well, it looks like sellers are starting to do the exact same thing, but there is a huge reason why. Like I said before, this housing market is absolutely crazy right now, and we are starting to see inventory levels get even worse in the United States, and the number one reason has to do with interest rates. But not interest rates of today, no, I'm talking about interest rates as they were in 2020 and in 2021. There were millions of buyers over the last couple of years that were searching for a home, and many of them got historically low interest rates. That means if they were to sell their home right now, they would be paying historically high interest rates, so many sellers are just opting to not sell their house. I bought my first house in 2020 and my interest rate is right around 3.3%, which is extremely low. I'm probably never going to see an interest rate that low in my lifetime, and what that enabled millions of people to do was to get into the housing market at a discount. So you had many Gen Zers and you had many millennials who were buying a house for the first time or maybe the second time, and they were able to save hundreds of dollars a month on their mortgage payment simply because interest rates were that low. Now, my interest rate was around 3.3%, but I actually know people that got an interest rate even lower. This affects the housing market pretty directly because you've got to remember what drives prices in the housing market is your supply and your demand. Right now, you have demand sort of dwindling from its peaks, but it is still relatively high. Meanwhile, you have inventory continuing to go down because sellers simply do not want to put their house on the market and re-enter the market and pay a higher mortgage rate and a higher purchase price for their home. Normally in the United States, especially when it comes to first-time homeowners, well, they typically improve their housing or they upgrade their housing every around 2 to maybe 5 years. This is because they have a big life change, like they're starting a family, or they get a raise at their job, so they have a little bit more income to go out and get a bigger and better home. But right now, many millennials and people who are still going through those life changes, well, they simply do not want to get a new house because a new house is too expensive, so they are staying where they're at. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me because if prices were a little bit different, if mortgage interest rates were a little bit different, then maybe I would try to go get a different house as well. Especially since my family is expanding now too, and eventually I might need a bigger and better house. But with interest rates so high and housing prices so high as well, that really just is out of the question right now. I can't see myself buying a house in this market with these crazy prices. But that's not the only thing affecting sellers. So sellers are also going through a process right now where they might be underwater on their mortgage. Basically, the value that they purchased their home for in 2020 and in 2021, well, now the value of their home has gone lower than what their overall mortgage was worth. So basically, if they were to sell their house, they wouldn't have enough money to pay off the mortgage completely because their house isn't worth as much as it was when they bought it. Now, this really isn't going to be an issue if you don't sell your house because there is a potential that housing values could go up and eventually you could get a large chunk of money for selling your house. But right now, there are buyers in many markets throughout the United States. I'm talking about some of the most heavily overinflated markets that refuse to sell because they are currently underwater and they're waiting out the market. Like I said before, there is just no affordable housing on the market right now. So sellers don't want to get into a bidding war and they don't want to have a hard time going out and trying to find a house that they can afford, especially if they currently own a house. So they just don't want to sell what they have. And that again is leading to really low inventory, and demand is definitely coming down. We have seen demand come down in the housing market, but it is still historically high. So that is why prices really haven't cratered in the housing market as of yet. Now, the other thing that is directly affecting the housing market today is something known as a credit crunch. And this is something that has recently happened in our economy, and it has a lot to do with the banking sector. First Republic Bank just failed just a couple weeks ago, and you also had Silicon Valley Bank fail, and you also had Signature Bank fail. These were some of the largest banking failures failures in American history, and what that caused was a ripple effect throughout the entire market. Basically, the confidence for the banking sector went through the floor, so people didn't really have confidence in their savings accounts and their checking accounts, and we have seen a big mass migration of money throughout the entire United States. We have seen hundreds of billions of dollars move from some banks to other banks simply because consumers don't trust the bank that they're doing business with. Now, banks need these deposits. They need consumers to use their banks so that way they have money to go out and make money. So the less money that they have coming in, the harder it is for them to sell mortgages or auto loans or invest. So what we're experiencing now is a credit crunch. We're having banks and financial institutions seeing the writing on the wall for our economy, and they're also having to be really careful about who they lend money to, so they are making it incredibly difficult. Some banks are increasing their lending standards, so typically you could actually get into a mortgage with a really low down payment. Sometimes you can put as low as 3% down on your mortgage, but a lot of banks and other financial institutions are actually raising this and making it a lot harder because they only want to give out guaranteed loans. That means whoever they are going to give the mortgage to is going to be able to easily pay back that loan. So some banks are only giving out loans to consumers who can afford to put 20% down or more. Now, obviously, that is definitely not every single bank. It just depends on the area and it depends on the bank that you want to do business with. Now, that is definitely not the standard yet across the board, but there are some banks that are starting to do this. But it really just depends on the mortgage amount and it depends on the area as well. Not to mention, interest rates are going up in the United States. So the Federal Reserve at its last FOMC meeting decided that it was going to raise interest rates by another 25 basis points or 0.25%. What that means is it's harder for pretty much everybody in the United States to borrow money, and that includes people who are looking to get a mortgage. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around to go out and buy a house. So pretty much everybody in the United States needs a mortgage if they want to buy a house. But with interest rates sitting at around 6 to 7% right now, well, that makes it really difficult for buyers to come in and get a mortgage. So they're just not able to enter the market, which is why we've seen that demand start to come down pretty substantially. Not to mention, with less buyers in the market, well, sellers don't really have anybody to sell to. So that means you have houses sitting on the market for sale, but nobody really able to buy them, which in that case, prices then start to come down. But overall here, this credit crunch is affecting just about everybody. And like I said, it's affecting big businesses and banks because they're not investing as much money in mortgage-backed security. So now you have treasury yields starting to go down as well, and you have mortgage-backed security values starting to come down too, which hurts investors, and it hurts real estate investors' ability to go out and invest in homes. So they're also starting to sell their properties, and they're selling them at a loss, which hurts values in everybody's areas. And Americans simply can't afford a home because prices are still really high, and on top of that, interest rates are still really high. So Americans can't go out and get a mortgage anymore like they could just 2 or 3 years ago. And the last thing that is affecting the housing market today is the jobs market. The vast majority of Americans use their 9-to-5 income in order to pay for their house, but we have seen a huge shift in the jobs market over the last year or so. The tech sector in particular has been hit very hard by really high interest rates and businesses just simply struggling all throughout the country, which is why we have seen those businesses lay off hundreds of thousands of people. So now all of those hundreds of thousands of people, if they have a mortgage, well, they're going to have a really hard time paying for it. And as those layoffs continue, well, you could see foreclosure rates go up in the United States, which they have been going up, albeit they haven't been going up as dramatically as we have seen in the past, like during the 2008 housing market crash. But what you have to understand here is that we still have really low unemployment in the United States. Like, unemployment in the US is around 3.4%, which is the lowest it's been since around the 1960s. That means we have so many people employed in the United States, and as long as people have a big enough income to support their housing payment, then we can't really see a housing market crash because there's too many people employed and they're going to continue to pay their bills. This is one of the biggest philosophies of the housing market, and it's one of the biggest philosophies that caused the housing market to crash back in 2008. Housing is the last thing that people are not going to pay for. It sucks to not have a car. When you lose your job, you're probably not going to be able to make your car payment, but it sucks even more to not have a house. So that is the last thing that people will not pay for. Americans will make it work, but if we continue to see big unemployment, then Americans just are not going to be able to make it work in 2023. And the chances of seeing higher unemployment are pretty high in the United States, according to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has a direct impact on our economy with their monetary tool, and that is interest rates. When their interest rates get really high like they are right now, well, that means it is really difficult for people to spend money and to borrow money. That includes businesses and investors. So businesses, because inflation has been high and consumers aren't spending as much money right now, well, that means that they're laying off people. And businesses are not getting investor liquidity, and they're not getting investors to invest in their company because it's really, really hard for investors to take on the risk of getting a loan right now because interest rates are really high. So investors aren't doing it. And like I said, that is hurting businesses directly. Ultimately, that is going to cause huge pressure on American businesses, and at the end of the day, it's going to raise unemployment. And that is exactly what the Federal Reserve wants, because they are focused on something called maximum employment. In their eyes, there is a maximum amount of people that can be employed in the United States at one time, and in their opinion, we have completely exceeded that. So that means they are projecting that with their interest rates staying so high and continuing to go up in 2023 and possibly into 2024, the unemployment rate could hit around 5%, which could mean millions of Americans completely unemployed, and that means millions of people unable to pay their mortgage. Well, like I said, that is just a potential. We don't know for sure if that's what we're going to see in 2023 or 2024. So there's actual unemployment that is currently happening right now with layoffs, and then there is the potential unemployment. And Americans who think that they might lose their job, who believe that the economy is in a rough shape, well, they're not going to go out and buy a house right now. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If you think you're going to lose your job in the next 6 months, you don't want to take on a multi-$100,000 commitment. So they are waiting the market out, and they're not buying a house, which means demand is going down, even for people who could qualify for a mortgage right now. The last thing you have to consider here when it comes to the jobs market is many Americans have not received a big enough raise to improve their housing situation in 2023. Many businesses have been giving out huge raises over the last year or so, but there are still lots of businesses who have barely given their employees a cost of inflation raise in 2023. What that means is that every single year that employees in the United States are not getting at least a cost of living inflation wage increase from their employers, well, that means they're essentially getting a pay cut. And when you get a pay cut 2 or 3 years in a row, you now don't have the money to upgrade your housing or to get the things that you need and want. That is a big issue, and what it causes is a big shakeup in the jobs market because, one, now you have people quitting their jobs voluntarily and trying to look for something else, which again hurts businesses, and you have employees who are losing money so they don't have the same money to pump into the economy, which again hurts businesses, and it hurts employment, and it hurts our stock market and our housing market as well. So is the housing market going to crash in 2023? Well, I honestly have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, so I can't tell you what exactly is going to happen next. What you have to consider here is the bias of a lot of these news reporters and a lot of these investors and experts who are calling for a housing market crash or are calling for you to buy a house right now. They may have some skin in the game, right? Because investors want you to buy a house because that means mortgage-backed security values are going to go up with more people buying in and housing prices going up as well due to demand. Others might want you to completely sell and might want to scare you, telling you that housing values are going to plummet 15 to 25% this year. They may want to buy your house and turn it into an investment property. And I'm not saying that experts are for sure doing this, but what you have to consider is the facts and not the emotions. There is a lot of craziness going on in the world right now, and you have no control over it. So the best thing that you can do is be financially educated and know what to do with your money. I've said this 1,000 times on this channel, but financial education is going to give you the tools to capitalize on opportunities down the road. It helps you to kind of take the fear and anxiety away from money, so that way you just look at the straight facts and you look at money for what it is, a tool to get the things that we need and want out of life. That way, if we do see a housing market crash this year, then you are prepared for it. Or if prices go way up and the housing market actually ends up exploding, then you are also prepared for that scenario. So you just want to create a plan, and the way to do that is to be financially educated. Now, if you want help doing that, I put out videos 7 days a week over on this channel, going over many different financial education topics and also covering everything going on in the business and financial world. So if you haven't done done so yet, be sure to subscribe before you go. And if reading is more your thing and you want to know everything that's going on in the business and financial world, then we are covering it 6 days a week over on Market Briefs. Everything from the crypto market to the housing market to the economy and stock market, you name it, if it's happening in the business and financial world, Market Briefs is talking about it, and you can sign up for free by clicking the link in this corner right here. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.